Welcome to Joe's Sports Channel. Ladies and gentlemen, to all the wonderful and beautiful, sexy Pinata Booni believers, it is November 10th, 2024. Folks, you see the title. It's been over 85 days plus, and we finally have the man of the hour. But before we bring the man of the hour, I hope all you guys are having a fantastic evening and happy Remembrance Day to all my beautiful and fellow Canadians for tomorrow that we remember the veterans that fought for us to have freedom of speech in this country. Ladies and gentlemen, my beautiful, beautiful Italian brother, Mr. Tony Ambrogio. Good evening, Tony.
Joe, how are you? And hello to the beautiful Booni believers. You better believe it's a beautiful day.
You know what? It's more beautiful than ever before. We have a beautiful sky in the backdrop. For you to say that, I appreciate that, my friend. How are you?
No problem. I'm well. How are you, Joe?
Good, man. How are things? How's TSN? How's
Good.
everything going on at work?
Things are going well. I work at the TSN newsrooms. We're working away on stories and editing, video editing, writing, producing, you name it, we do it. Teaching a bit at the College of Sports Media in Toronto and doing some public address work for the Ontario Hockey League's Brampton Steelhead. So it's busy.
It is. And I know the last time we talked, I said, hopefully, praise God, next time you come on the show, hopefully the Leafs are doing better than before. Now, the Maple Leafs are second in the Atlantic. You know, they're beating the Montreal Canadiens on Saturday night 4-1. They beat the Red Wings 3-1, and then they brutally beat the Boston Bruins. Impressive win at the Scotiabank Arena 4-0. They're on a 3-game winning streak, Tony. They're 9-5-2. My question to you is, how would you describe the style of the Maple Leafs hockey this season?
I think for the first time in a long time, they are playing a very much more playoff-style brand of hockey. They don't rush the puck as often. They don't provide that rush offense, scoring off the rush, scoring on 3-on-2, scoring on 2-on-1s. They are becoming a much more dump, retrieval type team. It is probably more suited to the playoffs. I would say it's not as entertaining as we've seen in the past years under Sheldon Keefe, but it might have them better prepared for the playoffs. So I would say, at 20 points, am I right? 20 points? At 9-5-2, they are probably in a pretty good spot right now. You got to figure Ottawa's better, Buffalo is better, Detroit is better, Boston and Tampa are still Boston and Tampa. So every point the Maple Leafs get is very valuable. And let's talk quickly about the Florida Panthers, man. I mean, I thought they were due for a bit of a letdown. Long season 2 years ago, Stanley Cup final. Long season last year, 7 games, win the Stanley Cup. It doesn't matter. They are far and away, in my humble opinion, the best team in the NHL right now, and probably the way they play, best suited for another long playoff run. And I must admit, if you had asked me in July, I probably would have thought they're due for a bit of a slump, but the way they're playing now, I don't see it. But as far as the Leafs, I like what we're seeing. They're beating the teams they're supposed to be. And I joked the other day, Joe, that the game against Boston was the biggest game in franchise history. Well, obviously it wasn't. But the way they played, I thought really sent a message to themselves, to their fans, and to the other teams in the Atlantic Division.
See, I totally, absolutely agree with that. And I see the Toronto Maple Leafs this season, they're playing good enough to win games. But my question to all the Booni believers and Leaf Nation out there is, when Austin Matthews is injured, every single player steps up and they win games. And for some reason, Austin Matthews is supposed to be a leader on that team. And you know what? He is a leader. But the true leader, I really believe, is John Tavares. John Tavares, we all know, he was the captain of the Toronto Maple Leafs for many years. Now is the assistant captain. He's playing like the old New York Islander style of hockey. I see some sort of Austin Matthews, John Tavares, kind of the old core team. Now, I'm liking Tavares' situation in Toronto. I'm happy the pressure's off him, but there's no more pressure now on Austin Matthews. Do you agree, Tony?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, when you're the captain, and in particular captain of a Canadian team, and a Canadian original 6 NHL team, yeah, you're right. There's a lot of pressure, a lot of expectations, and a lot of responsibility. And I find with the C no longer on John Tavares, he's more relaxed. He can just focus more on hockey. And I think not having the C for John Tavares has been a really good thing for him. And as far as Austin Matthews, another friend of mine and I, we kind of joke the C is too heavy for him, which again, we're just joking when we say it. I think he's a very good captain, a solid choice, but I do think he hasn't been playing at 100% this year. And I think that's probably, why he hasn't scored as many goals as we're expecting him to score early on in the season. And why I haven't really seen him get a lot of shots off. In years past, he would fire the puck from pretty much anywhere on the ice, and we're not seeing quite that much this season. So I think while the injury looks like it's not a serious one, Joe, I think it's been bothering him maybe for a longer time than the Leafs are letting on. And I just think this rest will do him good. And you're right. The team has played very well without him. And I think a couple of reasons for that. If you're Max Domi, you're going to get a bigger responsibility. You're going to get more puck touches. Same thing if you're Nick Robertson, even. You're going to get a bit more of an opportunity on the third and fourth line. Mitch Marner will have to carry more of the weight. And I think he thrives under that. John Tavares, as you mentioned. So while you need an Austin Matthews in your lineup, the one thing I like about the way the Leafs have played is they've really played well without him. And that's not only going this year, it's gone the past few years that we have seen. So I think they can be okay without him in short stretches, Joe. But if this injury, and we don't think it is, if this is a long-term injury, this will be a real issue for Toronto if they have to go more than 2, 3, 4 weeks without their captain.
I agree. And I have actually one of the Booni believers that wrote me something in the chat, and I'd like to bring it up here. And he says, Matthews has been part of the core group for players for several years now. How do you think his relationship with the team will change now he's captain?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I don't think it will. I think he's always kind of been a leader, even when he didn't have the C on his chest and just the A for the alternate captain. I don't think his relationship with the team will change. I think he, if anything, will be more determined to lead by example than he has maybe in the past years. And look, everybody on the team knows he's the best player on the team. Everybody on the team knows he's a top 5, top 10 player, not only in the NHL, but in the world. So when you have a player of that talent on your squad, you follow. You will rely on him to lead the way. So I don't think his relationship will change much at all with the players on that team.
I think the players are fine with him on the team, but the only thing is when it comes down to the postseason, to the playoffs, round 1, round 2, postseason, that's where it matters. You can have 50, 60, 70, 80 goals a season.
Yeah.
My friend, for some reason, it's a curse when it comes down to the playoffs. And I'm not cursing the Leafs at all. I love my Leafs through the thick and thin. Matt Sundin was my boy growing up. But it's like when Austin Matthews goes to the playoffs, for some reason, he gets more injured. When it comes down that he wants to play, he's not 100%. So, I'm finger crossing myself. I hope Austin Matthews stays healthy. I hope they go on a long stretch of winning games, but it matters about postseason. Now, the Leafs have a lot of depth, we all know, but some of their key players have struggled at times. We know that. Who do you think needs to step up for the Leafs to be a true contender in the playoffs?
Well, that's a great question. And I'm not trying to pick on the guy, but I think the answer is Mitch Marner. And I say that primarily based on last year's playoff run. Now, maybe Mitch was hurt, and he's never really admitted it, but he struggled last year in the playoffs. Look, he's a smaller guy, a smaller skilled guy. He's the kind of guy that can really do magical things on the ice easier in the regular season than the playoffs. Because in the playoffs, the ice shrinks, less penalties are called, the checking is much tighter. And if you're a smaller guy, you have to really work twice as hard as a regular-sized hockey player to fight through that checking, that mucking, that grinding that we see in the playoffs. So to answer your question, I think it's Mitch Marner. Do I think he can do it? Absolutely. Look, if anybody is motivated this year, it's Mitch Marner. Tough playoff last year. Took a bulk of the flack from fans and media. Whether it was fair or not, people said, for the most part, Mitch Marner cost the Maple Leafs a chance to beat Boston in the first round. If you ask me, their goaltending wasn't quite good enough. Matthews was hurt. Nylander was hurt. That's what hurt them. And plus, Boston, give them credit. They're a hell of a good team. Those are the factors, along with Mitch Marner struggling, that led to Toronto losing in the first round. But because we all want to pick a scapegoat, right? We all want to blame somebody. And Mitch Marner was an easy guy to blame. So he's a free agent after this year, looking for probably $12 million a year over an 8-year contract. He's got a huge chip on his shoulder. And what I like about how he's played this year, Joe, under Craig Berube, as opposed to years past with Sheldon Keefe, we're not seeing the junior hockey garbage, as I call it. We're not seeing the behind-the-back pass in the most dangerous areas that get picked off and lead to a 2-on-1. We're not seeing too many dangles that get taken away and lead to a 3-on-2 the other way. We're seeing much safer, smarter, but still brilliant hockey from Mitch Marner. And I really think if everything, you can talk about all the factors for the Maple Leafs come playoffs. You can put everything in a bag and say, yeah, that's power play is important, special team, goaltending, defense, top line, depth, all are factors, all are important. But at the end of the day, Joe Booni and your Booni believers, it may come down to Mitch Marner and how he plays in the playoffs that will determine if the Leafs can get through a round or 2 or 3, as opposed to another first round upset at the hands of whoever they play, whether it's Boston, Tampa, Florida, whoever.
You shocked me from saying that. And, I got to agree with you.
How did I shock you? You believe me? Are you believing Booni believers?
I believe you. And you know what? If you told me 6 months ago, if you told me a year ago, I would have said that's baloney, false news. But I look at it now. I think the guy that is going to show up in the playoffs, and especially in the regular season now, is Mitch Marner. Because remember William Nylander had a tough time in Toronto. Then that final year on his contract, he played good with that gratitude hockey. He wanted to stay in Toronto. And guess what? He's leading points right now as a Toronto Maple Leaf. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So I agree. I think Mitch Marner is going to have a hell of a regular season. When it comes down to postseason, I think this is a big bucks for him. I say at least $8 million, if not more, or if they even afford him.
Yeah. And what I like about Mitch is that he's really not letting anything bother him, right? He's not letting the screaming noise from the offseason bother him. He's not letting the struggles in the playoffs last year bother him. He's not letting anything bother him. The contract negotiations, none of it is bothering him. He's off to a spectacular start. And especially now without Matthews, he's really picked up the slack over the last couple of games. So I really have to give my, tip of the hat to Mitch Marner for the way he has played this year. You could make the argument it would be easy to understand why Mitch Marner would struggle this year, right? Went through a tough summer, tough playoff. He's got no contract for next year. I'm sure there's a lot of things in his head, but he's done a really good job in the early going here, the first 10 games of the season, first 10, 15 games of the season, not letting it bother him. He goes out, does his job day in and day out.
In your view, my friend, we're going to have a Booni believer question. In your view, what has been the biggest improvement in the team defensive play?
You know what? And I think that's a great question because it says team's defensive play. We're not just talking about the 6 defensemen. And the additions of Chris Tanev and Oliver Ekman-Larsson have really made that team a bigger, tougher defense core. To me, and I probably talked to too many hockey scouts, I think you got to have a big blue line to be successful. In my opinion, and again, I could be wrong, I think the best blue line in the NHL right now belongs to Las Vegas, the Vegas Golden Knights. And every one of those guys is over 6 feet tall. So I think why the Leafs are playing better defensive hockey is in part because of the additions they made to the defense core. Look, TJ Brody is gone. Lyubushkin is gone. Edmondson, who they got after the trade deadline, he's gone. In comes Tanev. In comes Oliver Ekman-Larsson. 2 solid veteran players. Tanev's so good defensively, so good at clearing the zone. Oliver Ekman-Larsson, he's got a bit more bite and snarl in his game than I thought I can remember, but obviously playing in Florida kind of brings that out on you, and he's carried it over here to Toronto. Also provides some offensive opportunities and some offensive talent. So I think defensively they're better, and I think under Craig Berube's style, there is a mandate that everybody's got to play both sides of the puck. You don't see your blue line, Joe, just for the national anthem. You are playing a 200-foot game under Craig Berube, and that's why this team is playing better defensive hockey. Not just the defenseman, the team is playing better defensive hockey.
Alexander Ovechkin, let's talk about the Washington Capitals for a sec.
Unbelievable.
Games, 10 goals.
Unbelievable.
32 goals to go. Does he break it this year?
So a friend of mine asked me a couple of weeks ago if I thought he would break it. I said no. I think he'll do it next season sometime, about 10, 15 games in. The way he's going, it looks like he'll do it this year, but I will stick to my thoughts. It won't happen this year. It'll happen sometime early next year, probably about 15, 20 games in next season. I just think look, I know goal scoring is up in the NHL, but Alex Ovechkin has played 20 some odd years. He's taken a lot of pounding on his body. He still has a great shot, and he's got a better team around him this year than he's had for the past couple of years too. But I just think, he'll start to slow down a bit. He'll start to tire maybe where he wouldn't have tired as much in recent years when he was a bit younger. So I don't think he'll do it this year, but I know a lot of people think the way he's going, he will, and I'm in the minority.
And I was looking on SportsCenter and Sportsnet and ESPN, the American stations. He's on pace. I have it actually right here. He's on pace for 54 goals and 76 assists and plus 15. So I really believe that he's going to do it this year. I talked to Rod Peterson a couple of years ago. He says absolutely he's not going to do it. I want to get Rod back in here and ask him that same question that I asked Ambrogio, my good Italian brother. So I think he's going to do it, but I don't think he wants more than that. I think he wants another Stanley Cup. And you know what? Washington this year has really impressed me. Like their style of hockey, their defensive play, their goaltending, their hockey style in general. It's just they look like a good enough team to make a far postseason compared to last season.
And the old saying, Joe, is if you are in a playoff spot by U.S. Thanksgiving, that usually means you're going to make the playoffs. And right now, Washington is in a playoff spot, and U.S. Thanksgiving is over a week away. So the Capitals are looking good. They've made some nice additions to their team. Pierre-Luc Dubois, I think, has helped out a bit. And I think they're getting better goaltending than they did last year. And that's all contributed to more points than they had at this same point last year. But there's just something about Ovi that I understand why people think he'll do it this year. I just think Mother Nature, Father Time is undefeated. And it's not to say that he won't break Gretzky's record, because I'm with you. I think he will. I think he's determined to do it. I just don't think it'll happen this year. I think it'll happen next year.
Let's say he did it this year.
Yeah.
Will he come back for another year, or do you think he'll retire?
Another good question. I think he comes back. I think he's got another year in his contract after this year. I think he loves playing the game still. And like you said, I'm sure he'd love to win another Stanley Cup. His rival Sid has 3 Stanley Cups, and Alex has 1. His rival Sid has 2 Olympic gold medals, and Alex has none. His rival Sid has 1 junior gold medal, and Alex has none. So I'm sure Alex wants to get a bit closer to Sid in some of those stats. He's beaten him in goals. That's cool. But he's going to want to try to get a bit closer in the Stanley Cup race if he can. I just don't know if the Capitals are good enough to do it. Are they better? Yes. I just don't know if they're good enough to beat those top-end playoff teams like Florida, maybe even like the Rangers.
Yeah. Got another Booni Believer question. I love these Booni Believers tonight. How do the Maple Leafs stack up against the Atlantic Division rivals? Good question, guys.
Yeah, no, it's funny because if you look at the Stanley Cup winners over the years, Florida won last year, Atlantic Division. We know Tampa's won 3 times, Atlantic Division. Boston won over a decade ago, Atlantic Division. Whether, you can debate this, but the Atlantic Division, in my opinion, is still, if not the toughest division in hockey, one of the toughest divisions. So right now, if I look at the Atlantic Division, I still think Montreal's improving, but a long way to go. Detroit, Buffalo, Ottawa are getting better. And Ottawa always gives Toronto and Boston troubles. It's amazing. Like last night, Boston didn't have a shot on goal in the third period. Not a single shot on goal in the third period. Unbelievable. So Ottawa, Buffalo, Detroit are getting better. But I still think it's Florida, Tampa, you have to give them credit, Toronto, and Boston that are the upper echelon of the Atlantic Division. I think Boston, while I still think they're a good team, are starting to struggle. And you're starting to see the wear and tear of age. And, as much as Jeremy Swayman's a fine goalie, remember, he split time last year and even the year before with Linus Ullmark. So can he handle playing 50 games this year? Can he handle playing 60? I don't know. And he had a long layoff. He missed training camp with a contract dispute. So we'll see how he does the rest of the way. But Boston looks a bit off right now. But Tampa, I thought they would slump. Nope, they're right there. As I said earlier, I thought Florida was due for a slide. Not a chance. They are proving to be still a Stanley Cup threat again for a third straight year. So I would say the Leafs stack up quite well. Ask me the question, Joe, after the trade deadline. How different will Toronto look after the trade deadline? Florida, Boston, Tampa, New York Rangers, Carolina. How will all those teams look after the trade deadline? Then we'll get a really better sense of the team going into the playoffs than we have right now. But as we speak right now, I think the Leafs stack up quite well, in large part because of their style of hockey, and I think the lessons they've learned over the years.
Well, I hope they learn the lesson because their lessons, they make a lot of mistakes. Now, the team that surprised me in the Metropolitan Divisions in New York, the New Jersey Devils, Sheldon Keefe, they're 10-5-2, 22 points on a 3-game winning streak. They're 4-2-2 at home. They're 6-3 away. Better record, of course, away. This team has impressed me. I don't know if it's goaltending. I don't know if it's coaching, but I was not expecting to see the New Jersey Devils first in the Metropolitan Division. What changed from the Devils' point of view, Tony?
Well, I think it's partly because of Jacob Markstrom, goaltender, experienced, a pretty quality goalie. And while he's had some off nights this year, having a guy that you can trust in goal makes a big difference for any team, whether it's Junior B, OHL, minor pro, or the NHL. And we're seeing the effect of solid goaltending in New Jersey. Again, Markstrom has had some off nights, but because he's got that experience, because he's been successful in his career, there's a calming influence on the Devils within net. 2, Dougie Hamilton is back healthy, right? Missed pretty much all of last year with injury. He has helped improve that defense core. And I think they had a lot of injuries outside of Hamilton last year, and they're a healthier team. I'm not surprised the Devils are playing well. A lot of skill, a lot of talent. These are not your grandfather's Devils, right? They're not a defensive-minded team. They love to score. They love to play offensive-minded hockey. I don't know if that'll play well for them in the playoffs, but they are a good team, and I would want to avoid playing them in a playoff series because they can score goals. And, Joe, what's been the Maple Leafs' biggest issue in the playoffs? Hasn't been goaltending, hasn't been defense. It's goals. They can't score goals in the playoffs because it is hard to score goals when the game becomes tighter and the ice is shrunk and the checking becomes harder. So I do like New Jersey. I like where they're going. I think Sheldon Keefe is a good coach, and I think he's proving that right now in New Jersey with the Devils.
You got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah.
Are the Winnipeg Jets the real deal? They're 14-1, 15 games, 28 points. Their record's 8-1. And we know the only team they lost to is the Toronto Maple Leafs. But seriously, Tony, are the Jets the real deal, or is it just one of those winning streaks like the Edmonton Oilers a couple years ago?
No, I believe the Jets are a real deal. Now, part of Winnipeg's issue is they play in a real tough division, right? You've got a really good Minnesota team, really good Colorado team that won the Cup a few years ago, and a lot of those main pieces are still there. But I believe the Jets are for real. Now, last year, I thought the Jets were going to beat Colorado in their first-round matchup. Because if you look at how they played against them in the regular season, Winnipeg went 3-0 against the Jets last year in the regular season and really dominated them. But in the playoffs, the Connor Hellebuck we saw for most of the regular season disappeared, and he struggled, and the Jets lost that series in 5. But I do say, to answer your question, yes, the Jets are real. They're big, they're heavy, their defense is solid, and you could make the argument they have the best goalie in the world in Connor Hellebuck. And their power play has been quite good this year. And Kyle Connor, of all the players in the NHL, Kyle Connor may be the one guy who you look at and you think, he does not look like a hockey player. But man, can he score. Dynamic score. So I would say the Winnipeg Jets are for real. It's just a tough division they play in. And can Connor Hellebuck, who the last 2 years has really struggled in the playoffs, if Hellebuck plays well, like we're seeing him now, the Jets are going to be a real dangerous team to play in the playoffs.
Your statement about 4 seconds ago, Connor Hellebuck, the best goalie in the world. That's a strong.
I said one of the best goalies. I didn't say I said one of the best goalies in the world.
I thought I heard best goalies in the world.
Well, he is one of the best for sure.
You really think he's one of the best?
Absolutely, yeah. All you can do is look at the numbers, Joe. Well, and I know last playoff and the playoff before it wasn't very good, but man, he comes up big.
Okay, we look at the playoffs. The numbers.
His numbers weren't good last year, for sure.
The regular season shows he's pretty incredible. He's pretty phenomenal. But when it comes out of the postseason, the last couple of years, he hasn't been the best. So
you're right.
I'm gonna go with you. I'm gonna shake your hand on that. And
okay.
If Connor Hellebuck, does well this year, does the playoffs, then you know what? I'll come down for a beer. We can go watch a Leafs and Jets game.
There you go. It's funny because Toronto has played really well against Winnipeg. Since you remember a few years ago, Mark Scheifele said in one of those post-game locker room chats, nothing better than beating the Maple Leafs. Well, since that statement, Toronto has handled Winnipeg pretty well, played them really tough. And when they played a few Mondays ago, yes, the Jets scored 4 goals, but 3 were on the power play, and 1 came on a delayed power play, where they pulled the goalie and had the extra attacker. So Toronto 5-on-5 in the one game, small sample size, played Winnipeg quite well. I still think the Jets, though, they are a great team. Love how they play. Love how they can roll 4 lines. Adam Lowry's a great player, great third-line type of player that every team needs. They're getting contributions from a lot of people, but Connor Hellebuck right now is one of the best goalies in the world, and he's a big reason why Winnipeg is where Winnipeg is.
Last question for the night. I'm enjoying every moment of this. I'm going to sink.
Nice, so am I.
Who is the Atlantic Division?
Well, it's hard to go against Florida. I just think, like I say, I thought they would slow down by now, but they haven't. They've got the experience. They seem to have a bit of a chip on their shoulder as well. Even though they're the Stanley Cup winners, it's like they play with an attitude that nobody believes in them, right? So I would say as we speak, the Florida Panthers are probably the favorites to win the Atlantic Division.
Okay. I'm going to agree with you, too. I think the Florida Panthers are way too dangerous. I think Tampa Bay would be a dangerous team going forward. We'll see after the trade
I
deadline.
give Tampa a lot of credit, because they've been on top for a long time. They just keep on rolling. Every time you think they're due for a dip, they're right there.
Yeah. They're
right there. Craig Button from TSN thinks they're going to be in the Stanley Cup final. That's his prediction before that, which surprised me. But he really likes the reacquisition of Ryan McDonough on the back end. And Jake Gensel, he thinks, is an upgrade. I shouldn't speak for Craig, but I believe he thinks Jake Gensel is an upgrade over Steven Stamkos at this stage of their careers.
I think, the team that really disappointed me, and I know it's still early in the season, but the Montreal Canadiens are 4-9. Like, I thought they're going to be better. And what it is, it's goaltending. They got players. They got coffee. It's goaltending. What's laying back the Montreal Canadiens. Like, you watch that Leafs game, they had a lot of opportunities to score, but unfortunately, there was bad turnovers, and that's what caused Leafs to win that game. So Montreal has a problem with goaltending. Montreal never had a problem with goaltending before Carey Price goaltending. The Canadiens.
And for Montreal, that game against Toronto's got to hurt because it's kind of their Stanley Cup, right? They know these are the games they really get up for because it's the teams they want to beat. 2, Toronto was on the second half of a back-to-back. So it was a tired Toronto team. Yet I thought Toronto pretty much controlled the first 2 periods. The legs started to wear out when Pacioretty got out. They were down to 11 forwards. Third period, they were a bit tired. And Montreal really gave it a push. But I never thought they would win the game. Do you know what I mean? I thought they'd give it a good push, and they did. But I never felt, if you're watching that game from a Leafs perspective, that Toronto was really in trouble. And I think Montreal is going to be a really good team in a few years because they have some high-end prospects. They have about 4 or 5 high-end prospects that could be top-of-the-line forwards and top-of-the-line D that will inject into their lineup. And Suzuki and Caulfield are still in the primes of their careers. I just don't know if they have enough veteran leadership right now. Maybe they'll get that in a couple of years, right? That'll help push them over the top. It's a rebuilding time in Montreal. For the Canadiens fans, I would say be patient. There are some top quality skill players in their system. It's just a question of how soon do they arrive and how do you augment those high skill players with the veterans to show them and lead the way.
Tony, let's do this once a month. Seriously. Enough with this 8 months, 1 year, 5.
Sure. I don't have time.
Let's do this once a month. We got it.
Show me the money, Joe. Show me the money and we're there.
The money. No, seriously, I love your intake, and I've had so many broadcasts over the years. I tell this in the bottom of my heart. I have so many broadcasts over the years, but the one that I connect with mostly is you, because you explain the game so much of hockey, and you work for TSN, and you're behind the scenes. And when you're behind the scenes, you're behind everything. So you see everything, you explain everything in detail. So I am actually just, I like to learn from you, and you teach me a lot of things that I don't know about the game of hockey. So I appreciate every moment you do, and I look forward to have you again, my friend.
Well, I look forward to it too, Joe. And I always like to learn. I tell my buddies I'm really close to the head coach of the OHL team in Mississauga, James Richmond, and I like having chats with James about hockey because I learned so much from him because he knows more about hockey than I'll ever imagine knowing. And I'm glad that I'm able to kind of take some of JR's wisdom and bring it onto the show with you. But I appreciate the kind words. Thanks, Joe.
No problem. You have a great rest of your day, and
you too.
Tomorrow, and we'll talk in a couple of days.
Sounds great. Thanks, Joe.
No problem. Have a good day.
You too.
Tony Ambrogio, folks, TSN reporter. Love the guy very much. To all the beautiful Booni believers, I want to thank you guys so much for this opportunity. I love the chat. I love everybody with his questions. You guys did an incredible job today. And without you guys and without God, this would never have happened. We look forward to see you Wednesday on Flow Hockey with the London Nationals. And we'll see you guys very soon. And guess what? Like Tony says, where's that money? Let's get that money. And especially let's get more broadcasters on the show as he does that beautiful Mamma Mia, flipping the money up there. Have a great rest of your evening, and go Texans, go.